What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, June 6, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever insanity is going to come out of Sodom on the Potomac. Heaven only knows, or goodness only knows here. Welcome to our show. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And today, of course, is tragically the anniversary of the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. We've had a few people calling into the show over the last day or so talking about it. And being much sadder and wiser today, Americans can look back on not just the John F. Kennedy assassination, but the Robert Kennedy assassination, and realize it was a conspiracy with a convenient patsy, Lee Harvey Oswald or Sirhan, but the Kennedys were a threat to the existing power structure, pretty much apparently the way that Donald Trump is. And so most people don't buy the official story any longer. And there was an interesting little article. This actually came out, I am not kidding you, in the Washington Post. And it turns out that there'd been a reporter in the Ambassador Hotel who'd been recording Kennedy during his victory speech in the California primary. Then this reporter followed Kennedy into the pantry but forgot to turn off his little tape recorder and didn't realize what was on it until something like 30 years later. And when he discovered what he had, he turned the tape over to audio engineer Philip Van Praag, who, using modern technology to clean it up, Van Praag counted 13 gunshots recorded on the tape. And said there may have even been more than that, but he wasn't sure. They were drowned out by screams. But at least 13. Why is this significant? Because the gun Sirhan had, 22 caliber, was an Ivor Johnson Cadet revolver, only held 8 shots. Now, as a side note, and I did footnote this on whatreallyhappened.com, back when I was just starting out in Hollywood, I had a lawyer. Everybody did. And my lawyer's receptionist was married to a Los Angeles police officer who was in the pantry in the immediate aftermath of the assassination, and according to her, he counted way more than just 8 bullet holes. And don't forget, there's that situation where Kennedy actually was shot in the back of the head, and Sirhan was in front of him, never got closer than 10 feet away. Now, there's another story, we've talked about it before, and it tells you just the lengths that people will go to keep these things quiet. And it has to do with a young man named Jamie Scott Enyart, who was, at the time, back in 1968, a student photographer, and he'd been allowed to basically follow the entourage around and take pictures. And he was taking pictures at the exact moment the assassination took place. And they were immediately confiscated by the Los Angeles Police Department as evidence. Okay, so far so good. Then, once the case was officially over, Sirhan did it, the case is closed, Jamie Enyart went to recover his negatives, knowing they would be worth a lot of money. And the LAPD claimed they'd lost them. So Enyart sued for the estimated worth of those negatives, and won the case. And then all of a sudden they got a phone call. Oh, don't worry about it. We found your negatives. They were up in Sacramento. We're sending them to Los Angeles by courier. So this courier flies down to Los Angeles International Airport, gets a rental car, supposed to drive on over to Enyart and hand the negatives over to him, but discovers he's got a flat tire. He pulls into a gas station to get the tire repaired, goes to the bathroom, leaving the car wide open and the photo negatives sitting on the seat of the car. So you can imagine, ooh, surprise, surprise. They were taken by the time he came back. And the police said, well, burglaries happen. We're sorry about this. And yeah, the courier was supposed to keep them with him, but, these things happen. And that was basically the end of the story. Now, one of the things I have at my website is a recording it's an excerpt of the lie detector test given to a witness named Sandy Serrano, who claimed she saw the woman in the polka dot dress escorting Sirhan into the pantry, and then afterwards running from the scene shouting, "We shot him." Now, the officer administering the lie detector, LAPD Detective Hank Hernandez, was rumored to have intelligence connections. And basically, instead of just getting Sandy Serrano's story, he spent almost an hour trying to get Sandy to alter her story and say, no, she never saw the woman in the polka dot dress. And Serrano sued for her harsh treatment, and as a part of the lawsuit was able to obtain a copy of the audio tape. So, yeah, with the hindsight of, with the wisdom of hindsight, yeah, it was another assassination, another cover-up. I think what was going on was that once John F. Kennedy was dead, Robert F. Kennedy knew that he was not going to keep the Attorney General job for all that long. So he decided he was just going to wait and bide his time. He was trying to gather evidence. He went over to the National Archives and tried to recover John F. Kennedy's brain, which had been preserved in formalin. That was missing. But once he became president, he would have the authority of the White House and the FBI and the Department of Justice to reopen the investigation into the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and I think that's the reason that he was killed. And then when Ted Kennedy was running for the White House, same logic. He could open up these previous two assassinations. So there was an attempt on his life by trying to run him off the road at Chappaquiddick. And because of Mary Jo Kopechne, Ted Kennedy couldn't win the White House, so they backed off trying to whack him. But that's basically assassination after assassination after assassination. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to get into the international news, starting with a story that came out of Global Research up in Canada, and they do a lot of good work. This story, interestingly enough, coincidentally enough, is hitting a point I've been making over the last week. There's no more diplomacy in Washington, D.C. There's no negotiation. It's all thuggery. And this article goes on and says that, yeah, the U.S. throws its weight around. There's no bargaining. Apparently, back during George W. Bush's term in office, the Deputy Secretary of State, Richard Armitage, told Pakistan, do as you're told or you'll be bombed into the Stone Age. We have this from the president of Pakistan himself, who did what he was told to do. Now, in the case of Russia during the Putin era, this level of threat is excessive for the very simple reason that Russia can bomb us back. So the threat now is do as you're told to do or we will impose sanctions. But I think those may backflash as well because Washington is isolating itself from the rest of the world, politically and economically. This stuff is backfiring. All right, getting on over to Syria. Troops are pulling out of Manbij. The YPG forces are withdrawing. And units of the Syrian Army's 11th Armored Division are being deployed into the northern part of the Syrian-Lebanese border, where they will replace the Hezbollah fighters. This will shut Israel up about coming into Syria, because Israel's been justifying their attacks on Syria by saying there are Iranian troops on the ground, which turned out not to be true, and there's Hezbollah is pouring into Syria from Lebanon, which also is a little bit less than true. But Putin and Assad have basically said the Iranians are, first of all, they're only advisors. There are no Iranian troops. Now they're replacing the Hezbollah forces with regular Syrian army. Israel has no more reason to be bombing and attacking Syria. They'll probably do it anyway, but they don't have a legitimate reason. Meanwhile, the United States government is debating whether to expand their military presence in Yemen. Apparently, the Wall Street Journal has reported the Trump administration is considering a request by the United Arab Emirates for direct U.S. support as a coalition of Sunni majority nations prepares to seize the country's biggest port at Hodeidah. Now remember, only yesterday the United Nations came on out and said they're considering taking direct control of the port, which would take it off the battlefield. It would no longer be a legal, legitimate target of the ongoing war, and the United Nations would keep it open for everybody to use, easing the humanitarian crisis. So it looks like there's a bit of a race going on to militarily seize Hodeidah before the United Nations can formally take it over. Now, Netanyahu is on a charm offensive, if you can call it that. He's making the rounds in Europe, trying to convince the European nations to pull out of the Iran deal. Because Netanyahu wants his war, and all of these European nations insisting they're going to stay in the Iran deal is just getting in his way. So he's up there talking with Theresa May, and he was actually out there trying to convince her that Tehran is already in the process of building a nuclear weapon. And Theresa May wasn't buying it. She's already said, no, Britain will not ditch the nuclear deal. So Netanyahu is still out there trying to get some traction with this one. Okay. Once again, the U.S. government has prodded China, goaded China, annoyed China, by flying these nuclear-capable B-52 bombers near the Spratly Islands. And China has already come back with a response saying, please do not do this. This is a provocation when you fly nuclear-capable bombers over our sovereign territorial waters. Now, the U.S. is staying technically outside the 12-mile limit, but it's still a provocation. This at the same time that the United States is trying to convince China to help them with North Korea, which shows you how dysfunctional our foreign policy has become. Over in Korea, a lot of things changing over there. First of all, Putin is praising courageous and mature Trump for agreeing to meet with North Korea. And Putin and Trump are also planning their own summit shortly thereafter. And people are noticing that all of a sudden, Trump is softening his tone on North Korea. He's already dropped the demand for instant and complete denuclearization, which he wasn't going to get anyway. That was a non-starter right from the get-go. Now they're talking phased denuclearization in exchange for phased investment and so forth and so on. Much more realistic situation. And so something positive might actually happen at this summit. It's looking very positive. Interestingly enough, along with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and representatives of China and Japan and South Korea, Dennis Rodman apparently is going to be in Singapore for this summit, because apparently he's really good buddies with Kim Jong-un, and he can kind of help smooth the way. So what has prompted this change in the approach to Korea? Well, we're getting a clue from an article out of hotair.com, which says that Mike Pompeo has frozen John Bolton out of the Oval Office meeting with the North Korean official. And the indications are that Trump and Pompeo are realizing that Bolton is a monkey wrench in the gears to finding a solution with North Korea. And, you know, Bolton was the guy who basically came out talking about the Libyan model of denuclearization, just flapping his gum. And he's made it very obvious he does not want a negotiated settlement with North Korea. He wants another war. Okay, well, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit. We're going to drop you in over Pyongyang and tell Kim Jong-un that you are on your way to whip his ass all by yourself. We're tired of war. 18 years of war, 7 ongoing wars, plus who knows how many covert interventions someplace. It's bankrupted the nation. It really has. Now, here's the lesson in propaganda. Back when the U.S. was just starting to make stink face at North Korea, the American corporate media came out with this story that Kim Jong-un's cousin, Jang Song-thaek, who once served as vice chairman of North Korea's National Defense Commission, was executed by being thrown into a pit of wild, extremely hungry dogs. Well, it turns out the corporate media got the story just a little teensy bit wrong because it didn't happen. No pit, no dogs. Jang Song-thaek is still alive. In fact, Dennis Rodman has met him. Then there was this other story about how Kim Jong-un's ex-girlfriend, Hyun Song-wol, was executed by firing squad. Nope, she's still alive. In fact, she appeared on state television in 2014, more than a year after the U.S. corporate media claimed she had been executed. Got to be careful about that corporate media. Now, getting on over to Israel, the Israeli army realizes that they have another PR disaster on their hand, having shot this 21-year-old Palestinian nurse, Razan Najjar. In fact, she's turning out to be the next Rachel Corrie. Nobody's going to forget about this. But the military has come on out and said, well, it was a tragedy, and yes, she was clearly identified as a medical personnel, but she wasn't shot deliberately. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you, because Razan Najjar was wearing clothes that clearly identified her as medical personnel. Whoever pulled that trigger, looking through that scope, had to know they were shooting a medic, unless the Israelis are just firing blindly into the crowd. And by the way, 4 more medics have been shot since her. Story coming out of Global Research, all Gazan casualties are intentional, not accidental. Yeah, they are intentional. Israel set up fortified positions with armed snipers firing at the protesters, and is still out there trying to sell the idea that these unarmed protesters represent an existential threat to Israel. And it's absurd. If there weren't so many people dying, it would be laughable to hear them go on saying, oh yes, we're afraid of their kites, we're afraid of their rocks and their signs. And what's really disgusting, of course, is to see all of these people in the corporate media and in politics who are out there just in lockstep, or if you prefer, goose step, with Israel saying, oh yes, the Palestinians are dangerous. The Palestinians are, they're all terrorists here. They're just being completely unreasonable, wanting their homes back. So, apparently, Israeli soldiers shot 21-year-old Iz al-Din Tamimi and blocked medics from taking care of him, and he died. Now, there's been a little bit of a diplomatic, sporting kerfuffle between Argentina and Israel because, as you know, we're coming up on the World Cup, and Israel had invited Argentina's soccer team to come to Israel, to Haifa, for a little warm-up game, and wanted to use Argentina rather, to help popularize Israel's celebration of 70 years of existence. But then they ran into a little bit of trouble because at the last second, Israel demanded Argentina play the game in Jerusalem in order to, again, reinforce the idea that Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel. And the Argentine team balked. They didn't want to spend the extra money. They'd already made all the plans to be in Haifa. And apparently Israel's negotiators succeeded in annoying the Argentines so much, they basically canceled the match. They're going back home. The Palestinians are celebrating. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're now getting a second source on that story about John Bolton. This is coming from CNN, basically saying he is now sidelined by President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because he's perceived as deliberately trying to derail the possibility of any negotiations with North Korea. And obviously that Libya model comment was quite inflammatory. And so, yeah, he's being sidelined, and I think he should be fired because Trump needs to set an example in that White House that he and he alone sets policy. And John Bolton basically went on out and decided for himself, no, I don't agree with what the president is doing, trying to get a negotiated settlement with North Korea. I'm going to go and derail it. I'm going to force the issue of a war. That's not your job, John. I think he needs to be fired. And I think Trump needs to set an example. If you work for the White House, I'm the boss. You better remember it. All right, let's take a phone call here. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were talking about the Palestinian protesters being shot.
Yes.
And I immediately thought, "Four dead in Ohio, four dead in Ohio." You know, that was a line from a song that referenced Kent State.
Yes.
And look at how much the shootings at Kent State, National Guardsmen shooting at unarmed protesters.
Yep.
And it was horrific, yet it profoundly affected the consciousness of this culture with regard to such matters. I mean, it even got referenced in songs and stuff. And people, it really affected the way that sort of stuff was approached in the future. And it, hasn't happened again. But that type of effect doesn't seem to be occurring for Israel. They end up using white phosphorus and shooting people randomly and shooting people on beaches, and yet they turn around and tell us that they're the most moral military on earth.
There's a classic case of false advertising. But to step on back to Kent State, you need to understand that was set up to go violent. And you had the protesters there, and you had the National Guard there. Apparently, my understanding is the first shot fired came from an FBI undercover informant who used a starter pistol. And that is what prompted the National Guard to open fire. They thought they were being fired on.
Right, so that of course is conspiratorial in nature.
Yes.
Which whether it were spontaneous or whether it were triggered that way, the good thing is that Americans responded to the horrific nature of it, and the culture didn't accept that sort of thing. And so I'd like to see a cultural. We are seeing Israeli citizens of good conscience who are, speaking out against this type of stuff.
Yes.
It's a very small minority, but these are people of tremendous courage who want to live in an ethical state, and some are actually standing up and voicing disapproval of such things.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people are expressing their disapproval, their condemnation of Israel. And for Israel, first of all, to keep on shooting these people, to keep on using these butterfly bullets, which they used on that Palestinian paramedic, the young lady. They shot her through the chest with one of those unfolding bullets, just tore her heart right out. And for them to go on doing that with the eyes of the world on them, and then stand back and say, oh, we're afraid of the Palestinian protesters. They're an existential threat, to our nuclear-armed, very well-equipped nation. The optics are really bad on this. And then when you have people like Nikki...
it can, in terms of use by militaries and stuff like that, I think you've even mentioned they're against the Geneva Conventions.
Yeah.
And, but now they're usable in self-defense situations where you don't want the bullet going through and killing 3 other people or going through somebody else's house.
Okay, you're talking about a different type of ammunition, because we researched what these butterfly bullets are that Israel has been using. They're basically, it's a single round, and it unfolds on impact and spreads out like an expanding round, and it's designed for maximum expansion.
Frangible.
That's not the same thing as frangible. Frangible means easy to crumble.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I stand corrected, I suppose. I'll have to look into it a little more. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. But any bullet other than your 7.62 full metal jacket or your 223 full metal jacket is considered illegal to use in war. The bullets you use during conflict are not supposed to expand any more than is, possible given the FMJ. But Israel's using these butterfly bullets, and they're causing horrific, horrific injuries. And then they stand up there and say, we're the victim. Talk about chutzpah. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, why the hell did Trump put John Bolton in there in the first place? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, everybody knows about John Bolton.
Yeah, I think it was a favor to Sheldon Adelson. And for that reason, John Bolton may keep his job, but they're going to window him, which means they'll give him a nice desk with a nice window and a nice view, and that's just where he'll sit for however long he stays in that position. But I'm in agreement with Trump and Pompeo on this. It was obvious Bolton was trying to basically derail the North Korea policy.
I still don't like the policy of these people in the first place, though. Like Mike Pompeo, like what he said about Russia. They're what do you say? They're not exceptional. They're just unique. We're exceptional. Stuff like that. Still, well, I mean, it's like you think you're better than somebody else, and they're not better than nobody. Nobody's better than anybody else. Maybe they're better in like sports or, working the casinos or on Wall Street.
Well,
but I mean,
we're going to find that out at the World Cup, I think. Here, no, right now the United States very clearly is an empire in decline, and the only way that we're still number one in the world is how many nuclear warheads we have. And every time this discussion comes up about which nation is great, which nation is not great, I go back to that wonderful HBO miniseries, The Newsroom. And I'm sorry the story cycle ended. I would have loved for them to bring that back. And on the premiere episode, there's this character, Will McAvoy, who's a news anchor. And he's at a college, and they're talking. Just students are asking him questions. Somebody asked the question, what makes the United States the greatest nation on earth? And all the other people on the stage say, well, it's freedom, and we've got this, and we've got that. And Will McAvoy says, no, we're not the greatest nation on earth. And then he goes down all these little appalling statistics about how, life in the United States isn't all that great. I mean, China has a greater life expectancy now than the United States. And they go on down with math literacy and the rest of it. And he ends up by saying, the U.S. leads the world in only three ways. Military spending, which we already knew, per number of people incarcerated per capita, and the number of people who believe angels are real. And that was it. And it was the best speech and the most honest moment on television. And I know it's still out there on YouTube, but that's exactly right. And every government likes to try and convince their population they're the greatest nation on earth. And there certainly was a time when the United States was a lot greater. When we could put men on the moon, when we invented amazing things. Those days are gone. And our infrastructure is crumbling. Our economy is hanging by a thread. And we have this government that seems to think the only way out of the pickle is to declare war on the rest of the planet.
What about humility, though? Mike, I look at us as being the bully on the playground, and sure, we can beat up everybody individually, but what happens when all those people line up together? They'll kick the crap out of us, right?
Yep. You're in agreement. And by the way, we, the American people, for the most part, are not the bullies. It is our so-called leaders. It's the John Boltons who got to where they are by being bullies and thumping their chest and saying, do what we tell you to do or we'll bomb you into the Stone Age. And that's a lousy way to run a planet. What can I tell you?
John Bolton's going to wind up eating his mustache because that's all he's going to have to eat in that bunker for after 5 years is up.
Yeah, I imagine so. But again, I think Sheldon Adelson wanted John Bolton in there because John Bolton will support the agenda for a war on Iran. But Bolton got his mouth going a little too soon on North Korea. And so, again, CNN is now confirming he's being sidelined. Because of Sheldon Adelson, Bolton may keep his job at the White House, but he's definitely not being involved in some of these policy areas.
And then that's why I wanted to continue just with India. Basically, they're saying U.S. mind your own business.
Yes.
You know, India and Russia go back a long time, Mike. I mean, like, you're talking about, you know, Soviet Union days, right? So, I mean, you got a long history with them, you know. So, you know, and they did a lot of projects together. So they're not going to, you know, Mike, you see what's going on. Like, it's just the world's moving away. It's so obvious now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The U.S. is pivoting away from the United States, or rather the world is pivoting away from the United States economically. These sanctions and tariffs are backfiring, and we're actually seeing a political shift as well, as these countries in Europe are literally saying, we can't resist U.S. pressure on us unless we get help from Russia. So it's another pivot.
And then one last point. Putin in Austria, you know, is it keep my enemy and my enemy is my friend? Because, you know, I wouldn't trust those people as far as I can fling them, Mike. Like, even when Putin's over, you know, like, you know, they'll stab him in the back when it comes down to it, you know. So, I mean, it's nice he was over there and stuff, but I don't trust those people. You know, they stab you once in the back, they'll stab you again and again and again, you know.
Yep.
I mean, that's all I got to say, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dustin. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
Okay, yeah. Mike, I just want to ask you, so they finally, you know, when it comes to John Bolton, again, that really threw me off the Trump train, completely, especially with this bombing of Syria. And to say that, you know, why he would put a guy like that in tells me that man is either too dumb or to be president, or he's lying all along, because both, you know, it's like you bring you make a rattlesnake a pet, bring it into the house, okay? A rattle, sooner or later, it's going to bite you. Because that's what it says, you know. It's not it's a reptile. It's probably not very intelligent compared to a mammal.
Yep.
And it has certain, it reacts on instincts, and an instinct is, if you get in its way or something like that, or feel threatened, it's going to bite. And it's got a poisonous bite, of course.
Yes.
Well, the same thing with a guy like Bolton. I mean, this guy's, you know, it's not that this guy was stored away somewhere and never heard from him. He was constantly on. And you know who one of the chief proponents put Bolton in there? It was Breitbart. The Breitbart people, you know, Breitbart News.
Yeah, Netanyahu was pushing for him to be given a position at the White House. So, yeah, Trump basically was paying off a bunch of favors by putting Bolton in there, and they may keep him in there symbolically, but reading between the lines on this CNN article, it does look like Bolton is definitely going to be sidelined, and he should be, because...
I didn't hear anything about that. I had to hear it, though.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about that. I wanted to ask you about it. They actually, he actually put Bolton down then, huh? Well,
yeah, basically Pompeo refused to let Bolton into that Oval Office meeting with that North Korean official. Bolton was trying to crash the party. They wouldn't let him get in there. I can imagine what a fist fight that might have been. And now, again, CNN is saying that basically Bolton is sidelined, at least as far as North Korea is concerned, after that Libyan model comment, which was obviously designed to inflame the situation and try and derail the talks.
Well, Bolton, I was listening actually to Breitbart yesterday driving home. You know, I got it, you know, XM.
Yep. And
I was listening for a little while to them, and they had some woman by the name of Caroline Glick on, and she was given she's a Zionist. As a matter of fact, she lives in Israel. She's one of these people, I think, with dual citizenship, because she has an American accent, right?
Yep.
Probably New York. But anyway, and she was given the same line of garbage that Bolton gives, that North Korea is connected to Iran. They're two totally different type of countries.
Yes.
Two totally different type of philosophy, too. Okay, that they're connected. But I heard Bolton talk like that before he became, before he got on before he was taken into the White House. So and this is the kind of garbage that Breitbart pushes today, and tries to tell everybody that they're alternate media. They're not alternate media at all. They're about as neocon as they come. I pretty much stopped listening to them at all. But I was playing my music, and I had a long ride home, and I wanted to, just to keep awake, hear something, and it turned out that this woman was on. She was being interviewed, I think, by Alex Marlowe or something.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, people got to be smart. They are not alternate. They're not alternate race. Alex Jones is still alternate. You know why I say that? Because even though, he may be a little bit too close with some of the Zionists or something like that, and somebody, he still allows other people with other opinions on. He still people get a guy like Steve Kuchenik on, who says not only 9/11 is a false flag, but Sandy Hook is a false flag.
Yep.
Of course, it's true. I don't like what he's done about Wolfgang Halbig. He should have Halbig back on his show. He talks about, but they'll also talk against what Trump did with Syria, how wrong it was. They'll have people from Russia on. They'll have people from a Russian news source. They'll have Alexander Dugin on. The Russian, one of the big Russian thinkers. A lot of people think he's one of the big chief advisors to Putin.
Yeah.
They'll have people like that on. So they're still alternate media. They make it clear they're against the wars. They don't like Bolton. They've spoken out against Bolton already. It's still alternate media. It's not, but Breitbart, you might as well listen to Sean Hannity or to Rush Limbaugh or maybe or Glenn Beck. I mean, basically, they have full neocon now. Full neocon.
No, I haven't gone to Breitbart in months now. I don't even remember the last time I bothered looking at Breitbart. But yeah, they're trying to find some way. If they can't shut down the independent media, they're trying to infiltrate it. And they're going to come on in, and they're going to have a lot of money, and they're going to start buying up as much of the independent media as they can to make it part of the propaganda machine. After we saw how quickly Breitbart changed. And you're right, they're full neocon. Just because they're on the internet doesn't mean they're independent media. Independent media means they're independent. They're not following the herd. They're not going with the flock.
No, I mean, they got a news site on the net, but their main radio show is on Sirius XM, which is a very much establishment radio station on both the left and the right. But, they have both a very much establishment, and they've got rid of people like Raheem Hassam, who spoke out against what happened in the Ukraine, and that was the last time he was on. That was the last time he was on as the host, and now I understand they finally admitted they got rid of him. Okay, and they're run by a billionaire family called the Mercers, who also. Oh yes, I've heard of them. Very much, they were also pretty much to get Bolton on there, and they're very, very Zionist, and they admit it. They admit it. They're Zionist. They say that's part of them being alternate media. How's that part of being alternate media, man? I mean, the best mainstream media as you can get. Yes. And, to think that Israel has a right to shoot people down, innocent people down, or to attack other countries like Syria, to launch missiles at them. If you notice, too, by the way, with Israel, they're not sending their planes in there anymore. They're going to Lebanon and firing their missiles from there. You know why they're not firing? Because they know the Syrians can shoot them down. That's why they're doing that. Yeah. They know the Syrians are perfectly capable now of shooting them down. So, but that's that. But they're all in. They support that 100%. I mean, there's nothing alternate media about Breitbart anymore. I wish people could get it through their head. I've gone on their Facebook already, and I've told them themselves a few times that you guys are phonies and fakes. And I'm surprised they haven't blocked me already. Blocked my comments and stuff like that. Because people got to know. I can't get on their radio show. I've tried a few times to get on the radio show, but I guess they recognize my number, and they're not going to, let it through. So But that's okay. But other people can do it, by the way, and don't tell them what you really want to say. Say you want to talk about something else, and then zero in and give them, make it clear you're from right. You represent people like Mike Rivero, not people like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck. You know, we got to do stuff like that because they're making a mockery out of this thing about the alternate media, man. This started to become a mockery. They're about as alternate media as Rush Limbaugh is alternate media, which of course he is. You know.
No, you're right. They're corporate media. They're trying to basically invade the internet and the online news community. And yeah, they're going to market themselves as alternative media, although I prefer the name independent media. But we know if they come on in and they've got a lot of money and they've got offices and they've got staff and they've got all kinds, somebody gave them the money to set up that operation. And they didn't do it out of the goodness of their heart. Whoever is funding these large operations, they're calling the shots. They're pulling the strings as to what the content is going to be.
At least,
go ahead.
At least somebody like Alex Jones, at least InfoWars has their own products they sell now. I think that's great. That they don't have to go to these big corporations. So I'm pretty sure they do have to compromise when they go on so many AM and FM stations now. He's like over 100 stations around the country now, from what I understand. And he probably had to compromise on that a little bit. This is why he doesn't want to stick with the Sandy hoax and everything like that, or get Wolfgang Halbig back on. I speak, by the way, to Halbig every couple of weeks, so I spoke to him yesterday, as a matter of fact. He has his umbrella. Everybody.
Mark, let's get back to InfoWars here for a second, because don't forget, somebody initially funded that operation to the tune of millions of dollars. And even though InfoWars is now selling its own products and has advertising revenues, unless they've paid that initial investment back, then they're still under the control of whoever handed that money over there. So, again, you've got to be careful about any independent media that seems to have a lot of money that you don't know where it came from. And we really do need to stick. Mark, let me finish up because we're almost at the commercial break. You need to stick with the smaller independent media outlets who are not beholden to a funding body of any kind. And you have to, again, be your own best analyst, do your own thinking, and we're just here to throw information at you to let you go on and figure out for yourself what's really going on in the world. Anyway, Mark, we got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting on back to the news here. Over in Great Britain, their Court of Appeals has overturned a high court ruling which found the British government acted improperly by curtailing boycott, divestment, and sanction campaigns against Israel's violations of international law. So the High Court had said, you can't do that. Boycotts are a recognized form of free speech, but the Court of Appeal has stepped on in and said, no, absolutely, the British government can shut down BDS anytime they want, because that's what Israel wants us to do. And to heck with ideas like freedom of speech and the rights of the British subjects. You just don't count when it comes to Israel here. And I think it's time for people all over the world to just start making a big stink every time they see their government bend over for almighty Israel. Because those politicians, whether it's in London or Washington, D.C., they're not elected and paid to serve a foreign government. And if they really like Israel all that much, they should just move there, run for the Knesset. But if they're going to be working in London or Washington, D.C., they serve the British and the American people. No government can serve two masters. And the government that serves Israel cannot, does not, will not serve the American people. Again, the optics look really, really bad on all of this. Now, the ACLU has come out with a warning about this new campaign to silence criticism of Israel, and they sent a letter to Congress opposing this new bill, saying it is overly broad and part of a disturbing surge of government-led attempts to suppress the speech of people on only one side of the Israel-Palestine debate. And that's absolutely true. Nobody's talking about silencing Israel's propaganda. You know, it's always the criticism, the negative side here. And the author of the bill is out there saying, well, we have to fight anti-Semitism. This is all about fighting anti-Semitism, which, no, it isn't. We're talking about the criticism of the actions of a government. But the ACLU made a valid point. The more the people of our country see the government basically abandon our founding principles to serve Israel, the more resentment is going to build. And where is that resentment going to be targeted? Well, it's if Israel's government has anything to say about it, they want Jewish people to be targeted. They need there to be the appearance of anti-Semitism because they make so much money off of it, special privilege. So, and once again, we're not talking about hatred of somebody's ethnicity or religion or they dress funny or anything like that. We're talking about behavior. Behavior. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, as you know, there is a freedom flotilla that is sailing from Sweden to Palestine, trying to break the 11-year blockade by Israel on Gaza. And one of the boats, named Freedom, arrived at the British port of Brighton yesterday. It was welcomed by all kinds of activists who were blowing horns. The ship is basically going to be anchored at Shoreham, a harbor in Shoreham, where it will sit there for the next 3 days. Now, what they've got is there's a number of these ships in the flotilla. They're all visiting different ports across Europe, and they're going to try and time their arrival at Gaza, more or less together, synchronization. Now, I have a word of advice for anybody who's on these flotilla. Post guards, because these boats have in the past years been sabotaged. Prop shafts cut, holes drilled in the bottom, all kinds of stuff like that. So you got to be very, 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 very careful. Now, here's a story. This is going on back to those accidents where U.S. Navy warships collided with commercial shipping. The USS Fitzgerald and the USS John S. McCain. And 17 people died in these collisions. And remember at the time, there was this online propaganda campaign, those commercial ships attacked our U.S. warships. Our U.S. warships are the best in the world. That was a deliberate attack. And of course, it was a line of BS, and eventually the commanding, or at least the supervising officers on both of these ships were relieved of duty. Well, the Navy decided they were actually going to go back and see how skilled these new officers are at handling a ship. And they tracked 164 surface warfare officers. And basically, out of that 164, just 27 officers seemed to know what they were doing in the eyes of the Surface Warfare Officer School, which conducted the assessment. The other 83.5% of officers had performance shortfalls in dealing with close approach and simulated collisions. Now, they're claiming the officers had a firm grasp of the international rules of the road for navigating ships at sea, but struggled to apply them practically while standing watches. Well, that's a bit of a letdown. But it's a confirmation of what seemed to be the case at the time. These new officers are not being fully and properly trained to handle these ships. All right, so let's turn to the domestic politics here. As you know, the OIG report is due out soon, although it seems to be lagging, and Trump is already out there tweeting, hoping that it's not being delayed or softened or simply slow-walked to try and minimize the damage to the Department of Justice and the FBI, and of course that's exactly what they're trying to do. What's leaking out so far, courtesy of ABC News, it's very tame, low-key stuff. They're saying that James Comey defied authority and was insubordinate. That's it? that's all you found in his handling of the Hillary Clinton email server investigation? Now, apparently, Inspector General Michael Horowitz also rebuked former Attorney General Loretta Lynch for her handling of the federal investigation into Hillary Clinton's personal email server. But if that's all they're talking about, defied authority, was insubordinate, he's already been fired. What are they going to do, hire him back and then fire him again for being insubordinate? But it does justify Trump's firing of him. And anybody who's thinking of impeaching Donald Trump for obstruction of justice over his firing of James Comey, now you have the OIG report. Comey was being insubordinate. Trump had every right to fire him. Now, the interesting development, as you know, we're coming up on the hearings about this OIG report, and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is set to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee soon, but apparently he is seeking an immunity deal. And basically, under the immunity deal, no testimony or other information provided by McCabe could be used against him in a criminal case. This is coming from his lawyer. So there's going to be something interesting there. If there's an immunity deal, McCabe is going to talk, unless he winds up in Fort Marcy Park. Apparently, this is the week for Let's Make a Deal. The Democratic Party IT aide Imran Awan and his wife Hina Alvi have struck a deal with prosecutors for a plea bargain to not go to trial, to not risk having certain things come out in open court that should remain hidden. And their hearing for the plea deal is set for July 3rd. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Mueller apparently is considering charging Papadopoulos as an unregistered agent of Israel. And apparently, this Italian attorney who married Papadopoulos 3 months ago claimed that Mueller had evidence her husband had worked on behalf of Israel without registering as a foreign agent during his time as an energy consultant and prior to joining the Trump campaign. So once again, Mueller is out there thrashing around, trying to find anything that looks bad, even though it is irrelevant to Trump's campaign and his original mission statement, which was supposed to be the Trump-Russia collusion. And by the way, the Department of Justice apparently has just informed Judicial Watch that they are going to get an unredacted copy of Rosenstein's scope document, the one that everybody claims allowed Mueller to just go on a fishing expedition everywhere. Meanwhile, Mueller is looking at this company called Wikistrat, and Wikistrat bills itself as a crowdsourced geopolitical analysis firm based in Washington, D.C. But interviews with current and former employees and documents tell a different story. The vast majority of Wikistrat's clients are foreign governments, that Wikistrat is, for all intents and purposes, an Israeli firm, and that the company's work was not just limited to analysis, but also intelligence collection. It's a spy front. Now, as you know, one of the stories that's come on out ever since the Stephen Halpert revelation is that Obama's intelligence agencies were trying to set people up to fabricate the Trump-Russia collusion story, to try and get them into compromising collisions, or compromising meetings, rather, that could be used to say, oh, see, that was definitely collusion. That was definitely going to be collusion. And it turns out there were no less than 8 of these attempts made. There was the one where Stephen Halper tried to entrap Michael Caputo, the Trump Tower meeting, Mike Flynn and the Logan Act, Andrew McCabe tried to set up Reince Priebus, and on and on and on. Very, very dirty politics. This is a huge scandal. We're way beyond Watergate at this point. Now, demoted FBI agent Peter Strzok had a much larger role in the Clinton and Russia probes than previously known. Now, as you know, Peter Strzok was on Robert Mueller's team up until last year when some text messages came on out. First of all, revealing he was having an amorous affair with Lisa Page. And more than that, both of them were just very obviously biased against Donald Trump. They were not being professional at all. But apparently, a lawmaker familiar with the situation in an interview on Fox News said they had a larger role. Peter Strzok was doing a lot more inside this investigation, trying to gin up this Trump-Russia collusion. And they failed miserably. They absolutely failed. So let's talk about Valerie Jarrett. And a lot of people are saying, oh, poor Valerie, because of what Roseanne Barr said. And yeah, Roseanne Barr went way over the top. But it should not distract us from the fact that Valerie Jarrett still has to explain why she helped cover up and enable the biggest charity fraud ever, the Clinton Foundation. And the process begins with asking, why did Jarrett and Obama push former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination? Because by July 10th, 2015, Hillary Clinton would have been an unelectable candidate had the full truth been known. And the full truth was known out here on the independent media, and I think that's a big reason why Trump is now sitting in that Oval Office. As you know, we had primaries in 8 states yesterday, including California, and depending upon who you're reading, the Democrats either did very well in California or not so good. And one of the not-so-good articles is over at the American Thinker, saying that there really wasn't a blue wave in California, that the Democrats who won there were poised to win anyway. It's not a surprise. What the Democrats did not succeed in doing is displacing the GOP significantly. In fact, according to the American Thinker, the GOP is actually better poised for gains because of the Trump wave, if Trump can keep that going. But he'd better start producing on some of his campaign promises, or that wave is going to fizzle here. Meanwhile, and you just knew it was going to happen, down in Los Angeles County, over 100,000 voters' names were left off the voter rolls. And they say, oh, it was a printing error. Really, it was a printing error. And these people were able to cast provisional ballots, but this had an impact on more than a dozen House districts, especially the one in the race to replace retiring GOP Representative Ed Royce, where Democrats were trying to grab that seat. So I'm not buying printing error. I'm buying, it's the same thing all over again. The same thing we saw in 2016. Massive, massive, massive election fraud. Now, John McAfee has announced that he will step into the 2020 election bid to save the crypto community. And so he's going to run for president, probably from the Libertarian Party. Apparently, the executive chairman of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, has left his job in order to run against Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential primaries. Looks like everybody's stepping on in. I may have to revive my campaign. Rivero 2020, he could hardly do any worse. Now, Kelly Sadler was this White House press aide, and she made a very callous remark about John McCain's illness about a month ago. And it was private, in a private meeting. She didn't say it in front of the reporters, but somebody leaked it to the media. And basically what it was is that Sadler responded to Senator McCain's opposition to President Trump's pick for CIA director by saying that he's dying anyway. Like, we should ignore him, which was a tacky thing to say. Her comments were inappropriate. But it was supposed to be a private meeting. And again, they got leaks all over that White House, they really do. By the way, do you know why Richard Nixon called his Dirty Tricks squad the Plumbers Unit? To plug the leaks. He had to deal with this as well. So let's talk about the economic news. And again, depending upon who you're reading, the news is either good or bad regarding Donald Trump's trade wars. Now, this one is from Zero Hedge, and it says, Trump's trade war is working. U.S. trade deficit collapses. Then you have this other one down here from CNS saying that merchandise trade deficit with China hit a record high through April. And then you have this other one down here that came out of Zero Hedge saying $1.25 trillion, that's the cost of Trump's trade wars so far. This is coming from Kaonohi. And basically saying that a few months ago he'd said this wasn't going to work. And Trump flipped on it. And I don't think it's going to work. I think the United States is walling itself off from the rest of the world economically with all these tariffs and sanctions. Now, this is an article I referenced talking to one of our callers earlier in the day. This is coming out of Sputnik News. EU cannot resist U.S. policies without Russia's help, German media says. Basically, what you have here is Europe wanting to basically stay in the P5+1 deal. They want to stay away from being tariffed and sanctioned by the White House. And so the German media is now saying it's time to pivot toward Russia. This is all backfiring. And part of the problem is because the White House itself is badly factionalized, as illustrated by John Bolton. They're not all on the same team. They're not all playing the same game. And everybody's out there just doing what they think they want to do, serving whatever interests they serve. Clearly, Bolton is serving Sheldon Adelson and Bibi Netanyahu. But Trump, unfortunately, is proven to be a very weak leader. He's easy to push around. He's susceptible to flattery. That's a bad sign with all that's going on here. Now, Russia, or actually Russian Railways, which is the state-backed leader in the industry, has expressed an intent in participating in the Trans-Arabian Railway project. Now, this is a project that's been on the drawing boards for a few years, failed to get off the ground. Russia's now going to put money into it to get it started. And this will connect basically the Middle East with a high-speed rail system, and it will make the Saudis far more multipolar. So Russia and China are doing these amazing infrastructure projects out there. Meanwhile, down in Turkey, they've had some serious economic hardships, maybe economic war, and they're fighting runaway inflation. But they're trying to stabilize their currency and economy by using gold bullion. They're going back to a gold standard because that's going to stabilize the currency. And Turkey has roughly 311 tons at the Bank of England, or at least that's what the Bank of England is saying. We know there's been an issue with gold stored at these vaults not actually being there. Here's another article from Sputnik News, and this one illustrates why I've had so many concerns about cryptocurrencies. And the article is titled, Why Soros, Goldman Sachs, Wall Street Tycoons Embrace Bitcoin. And it's saying that all of these Wall Street firms are all of a sudden warming up toward Bitcoin, and they're out there promoting it, and they're saying this is great and this is wonderful. But cryptocurrencies can be used for ill-gotten gains because they can be run as a pyramid scheme. And you need to remember, George Soros is the man who broke the Bank of England. And all of a sudden, he's all hot for the cryptocurrency. And I've always said, it's got the smell of tulips about it. And you need to be careful here. Apparently, according to this article coming out of Investment Watch blog, in 16 years, Social Security will have to cut benefits by 21% if lawmakers do nothing to cure the program's long-term funding shortfall. Well, it's not really a funding shortfall. And we talked about this all the way back when Clinton was in the White House. Bill Clinton got his magic federal budget surplus by basically borrowing money from the Social Security Trust Fund, the baby boomers' retirement. And they can't pay it back, and that's why Social Security is in trouble. And it wasn't really their money to play with. It's your money. And you were told you could trust the U.S. government to take your money, invest it wisely, and provide a comfortable retirement. And now they're talking about, well, cutting the benefits 21%. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And something just came up here on American Patriot Daily. Actually, it's on Twitter. It's being reported on American Patriot Daily, and I just linked to it from whatreallyhappened.com. And Trump just pulled a brilliant maneuver. Because, as you know, there is this big scandal brewing over the fact that the FBI had at least one spy in the Trump campaign. And the FBI apologists and defenders are out there saying, well, we were only spying on the Trump campaign for Trump's own good, and we were just rooting out the Russian infiltration. And then Trump came back and asked a brilliant, brilliant question. If the FBI was worried about Russians infiltrating his campaign through Paul Manafort, why not just tell him? If it was being done for Trump's good, why not say, we're spying on you to protect you from the Russians? So the deep state is back on the ropes here. Way to go, Donald. Way to go, Donald, here. Okay. God, there's just so much craziness going on in the world today. Over in Europe, well, actually over at the United Nations, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is out there saying that mass migration should just be accepted by the Western nations. It's not going to stop. You just have to accept open borders or no borders, and these refugees are going to come on in, and yes, crime is going to go up, and there are going to be all kinds of communicable diseases, and there's going to be violent crime, and there's going to be out-of-control rape, but really, just get used to it. It's the new normal. So they're really pushing this globalist agenda as hard as they can, and I think the reason is they're seeing that people are pushing back, that the Germans want to go on being German, the French want to go on being French, the Italians want to keep on being Italian. And as a matter of fact, they've announced the time and place for the Bilderberg meeting. And they're saying that basically the top agenda for the Bilderberg globalists this year is the populist uprising in Europe. How the European people are saying, no, we don't want this globalist agenda. And of course, the globalists are out there saying, populists, really, what do they think this is, a democracy? Well, it's supposed to be in most cases. But yeah, that's it. They're trying to figure out how they can tamp down criticism of all the damage and destruction the open borders have done everywhere it's been used. And that's going to be a tough sell. Yes, the corporate media will obediently go along with saying, oh, this is all wonderful stuff. But in this age of the internet and social media and cell phone cameras, everybody is documenting what's going on. I saw a couple really ugly videos of moped crimes. This is the newest thing, where these refugees come in to Great Britain and they buy mopeds and they literally use them to snatch purses or rip watches off of people's wrists as they drive by. And they're carrying knives and they're hurting people. And the police can't keep up with it. But George Soros thinks this is great. Yes, I'm going to have my one world government here. Speaking of London, apparently one of the Brexiteers is saying that the negotiations are going appallingly, and the founder of UKIP has claimed that it's obvious at this point Theresa May doesn't really believe in Brexit. She keeps making all these concessions about, yes, we're going to stay in the customs union, yes, we're going to do this, and yes, we're going to do that. And Mr. Scad, founder of UKIP, started a movement called Clean Break, saying anybody could do a better job than Theresa May. in delivering what the British people voted for in June of 2016. And he's saying it's time for Theresa May to step down. And yes, it is. Because these elected leaders are supposed to do what the people of their country says to. Not George Soros, not Brussels, not anything else like that. You're there to serve the people, and if you don't like it, find another line of work. Meanwhile, the European Union has basically dropped a rock on the car manufacturing industry in Europe as European governments are being advised to not use British parts in vehicles for export ahead of Brexit. So there's going to be a tremendous slowdown in car production until a domestic parts industry can be built on up. So the Dutch government has advised all Dutch businesses that if a large part of your product consists of parts from Britain, domestic exporters may lose free trade access under the existing deals. What a complicated mess they have made. It really is out of control over there. And, you know, it strikes me that they spend more work arguing about the products than actually working on the products. That's how decadent we've become. We're going to take another commercial break here. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I could use a few phone calls. Down in Nicaragua, they're having a tough time down there. But then if you look all over South America, all of a sudden, a lot of places, Venezuela's having a tough time. Argentina's having a tough time. Brazil's having a tough time. It almost seems like there's a pattern. But apparently, 7 weeks ago in Nicaragua, there was a violent crackdown on student protesters. And they were trying to ignite a movement to oust the president of Nicaragua. And as a result of the crackdown, daily life has become difficult and dangerous for a population increasingly in open rebellion against the government. At least 113 people have been killed, more than 1,000 injured, hundreds arrested since the political uprising began in mid-April, according to human rights groups. Dozens of others have simply disappeared. And up until recently, Nicaragua was considered one of the safest countries in Latin America. And now families are afraid to leave their homes after dark. Barricades are set up by protesters, they block the highways. Public transportation is scarce, and business in some parts of the country has basically ground to a halt. So it's really rough. This gets us to this next article from Zero Hedge saying the U.S.'s fingerprints are all over Nicaragua's bloody civil unrest. And we know that the U.S. has been playing this game repeatedly, at least as far back as the end of World War II. Forget about direct invasion. That's too messy and expensive. Go on in, destabilize the government, overthrow it, install a puppet regime. The U.S. has been doing it over and over and over again, more than 50 times. And they're batting about 500. But that's what they're doing. And apparently, this group that is out there trying to bring down the president calls itself the Pink Tide, which sounds alarmingly like another so-called color revolution. And apparently over in Brazil, Dilma Rousseff was removed from power in a right-wing coup, co-conspirators of which have now managed to imprison the current presidential frontrunner, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. So South America is in play one more time, and that's going to be a shame because it's going to mean they're going to hate us. They're going to hate the United States of America. It used to almost be a cliche that if you went south of the border, it was Yankee go home. And it didn't have anything to do with ordinary Americans who were just trying to be tourists. It had to do with the realization that the U.S. government, through covert action, through predatory banking practices, was trying to lay claim to the resources of South America. And it looks like it's happening again. We've returned to the age of colonialism. That's what's going on. the U.S. is trying to colonize the world. One after another, after another, after another. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our volcano because there have been some dramatic developments. Now, let me set the stage here. If you've been to Hawaii, to Kilauea crater, you know what I'm talking about. There's the main crater itself, which is the big one, and then down in the bottom, off toward the southeast, there is a second crater, which is the actual vent for the lava to come up. It's called Helemaumau. And apparently at some point last night, the floor of Kilauea crater has collapsed along with much of that southeast rim of the big crater. And now the conduit or the vent is blocked. Lava is still pouring out from the rift zone, but now the volcanologists are saying that they're concerned, now that this vent is plugged, that there may be a much larger, more explosive eruptive event down the road somewhere. It's going to take a while to build up that pressure, but yeah. And it's turning into a serious situation. Not as serious as Fuego, which is turning out to be their worst eruption in the last 500 years. And in both cases, the people are living on these volcanoes, and yes, every once in a while there's a little eruption, but they weren't expecting it to be this big, either on the Big Island or on Fuego. And a lot of people are being hurt. I think something like 300 people have been killed in Mount Fuego. And it is a serious situation here. So we're keeping an eye out. I've got my little seismograph set up. I actually have a quake alarm. But I've noticed that unlike the big quake we had a few years ago, which was very deep, and we felt it here on Oahu, these big quakes they're having on the Big Island are way up high on the top of the cone, and they don't seem to couple the energy to Oahu as much, which is a good thing for us, obviously. We don't need to have a big earthquake here. But apparently a second home of the Hawaiian Island mayor was eaten by the lava. And no signs of stopping. No signs of stopping. Green Lake has been completely erased from the face of the earth. The lava has completely obliterated Kapoho Bay. And apparently they've discovered about a dozen people trapped on the eastern end of the island after the lava cut off all access to the rural community. So they're trying to get the helicopters in there. But again, the helicopters can't fly in that volcanic smoke because it's fine particles of glass. And it can actually melt inside the engine and cause all kinds of problems here. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. John in Austin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I never thought Bibi Netanyahu would make me laugh, but I heard a little clip of his meeting with Theresa May earlier on, and one of the things he told her was that the Palestinian protesters were rushing the border in an attempt to kidnap Israeli soldiers. Can you believe that garbage?
It is amazing. It is amazing. I mean, he apparently was telling Theresa May that Iran is already back to building a nuclear weapon.
Oh, yeah, I found another, I've been searching the web. I heard it on a radio show from the UK earlier, and I'm trying to track that down, but I haven't found it yet, but I found another one. And just listening to this man is just about the most disgusting experience any human being should ever have to suffer. I mean, the guy is just a monster, an absolute monster. Just one more thing, Mike. I heard you mention Alison Weir's website yesterday, If Americans Knew.
Yes.
And I've been following Alison for quite some time. In fact, I met her recently. She came to Austin to give a presentation at the University of Texas here. Now, they're doing a live stream here on Saturday, June the 9th, between 6 and 8:30 p.m., which I assume is Central Time. So if anyone is interested in that, I would recommend that they tune in and listen to it.
Okay, well, yeah, definitely. And I've been following Allison's work for a long time, and every once in a while I'll link to that. And again, the URL is ifamericansknew.org. and it is a very factual laying out of the actual numbers of who is killing who in Israel and Palestine. And it's a very different picture than what the U.S. corporate media will give you. But you're absolutely right about Netanyahu. The man has got no shame. I remember when he stood up there at the United Nations with that cartoon bomb of his and started talking about nuclear ducks. And, you know, this is a man who obviously is too used to not having anybody challenge him on anything that he says.
Yeah. The only thing missing from that little scene was the roadrunner coming along, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Okay, Mike. Thanks a lot, mate.
All right, we're going to switch over to Lisa in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. The other day, I think it was yesterday, a fellow called in and was saying he was kind of supporting Israel and going on about Muslims and all that. I think you might remember that. You took him to task and did a great job.
Yes.
You remember who I'm talking? Okay, yeah. Well, the reason it kind of sparked my memory a bit, because I'm hoping this doesn't become some sort of trend. I have a coworker that I sent her a video. It was an interview of Max Blumenthal and some other people about the Gaza situation. Yep. And she wrote back to me, and I was absolutely appalled. I mean, I couldn't get over it, all she was saying. It was how much she couldn't stand Muslims and on about Muslims, and I didn't even bring religion into it at all. It's a humanitarian crisis, in my opinion.
Yes.
And she just went on about it, and she's just sick of hearing about Gaza because they're all Muslim and blah, 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 blah. And then to hear that fellow, I'm hoping this is not going to become a talking point. Have you heard that from anyone else, or is this something we need to kind of prep for, so to speak?
Well, the gentleman who called into the show, I think he was, a disinformation operative. But unfortunately, Israel does successfully exploit fundamental religion in this country. They've succeeded in convincing Christians that they are the inheritors of the biblical land of the Hebrews, and there are some fanatical supporters, the Christian Zionists, although their numbers appear to be in decline right now. But these are people who don't think. They're just caught up in their beliefs. And remember what I've said about beliefs. Beliefs are chains to hold free minds enslaved, and you just had a good example of it. She's not thinking, she's not analyzing, she's just, my beliefs tell me to do this. I believe the Muslims are bad because TV told me that they were bad, or my pastor told me that they were bad. And she doesn't want to find out for herself. She doesn't want to find out that she's wrong. And you will find out that people who operate on their beliefs get very, very defensive about it.
You're right.
An attack on their beliefs, they'll take it like it's a personal affront.
That's right. Well, what I ended up doing is, if I can just keep you for another minute,
sure,
is I'm pretty good at, debating lately, And so I wrote her back, and then she said she kind of liked my approach. So I just told her the story of how, because I am Jewish, even though I don't practice the faith anymore.
Yeah. So
I was Jewish, whatever you want to say. But I have been through this whole study session with the rabbis and, what we were taught about Israel and all that stuff. And about 4 years ago is when I found out through Miko Peled, that author I told you about before when I called in, the real history over there. I was really sick, literally physically sick for a week. So I explained all of that to her and how we've been sort of brainwashed by way of our media and our talking points, much in the same way that we're brainwashed with American exceptionalism.
Yes.
And that sort of thing. And I just laid out stuff for her. I gave her a link to Miko Peled. And she wrote back and kind of turned the corner a little bit. I was real pleased with it. But I just had a couple of issues last week with my boss didn't want to publish something I wrote about it. He was afraid we would offend advertisers. I said, well, if my advertisers are offended by people being murdered and my speaking out against it, then I worry about their moral fabric. So it was just a bizarre week with Israel in the center of it all for me.
Well, I think Israel is realizing that they have really messed up big time. Of course, Israel's government never backs off. They never apologize. They never say, we were wrong or we're sorry. And so they're just trying to basically bluff their way through the Bloody Monday massacre and the shooting of that Palestinian medic. Again, Netanyahu's out there saying, oh, they're trying to rush the fence to kidnap Israeli soldiers. Iran is building a... And they just keep upping and upping the propaganda. But after a while, they're just undermining their own credibility. And people are getting turned off by it.
They're sounding desperate now. I mean, I can sense it. It's just so easy to sense. I hope this outcry by the international community, which is kind of the biggest one I've noticed anyway.
Yes.
I hope that it does some good, because this is just sheer insanity. But thank you for taking my call. I just thought I'd get that story out. I was going to call when it happened, but I just wanted to sit on it for a little bit.
Okay, well, Lisa, thank you very much for the phone call. And yes, I'm sensing desperation and panic. Israel is losing its grip. This carefully crafted illusion of perpetual victim Israel is being shattered. And I can understand why Israel absolutely hates the internet and the independent media, because we can't be bought. That's what really comes down to. We cannot be bought the way the corporate media can. And that's why we're a threat to them. All right, we're going to go to Carrie in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, love your show. Second-time caller. This is very timely. Have you heard of Patrick Little?
The name rings a bell, but I'm not sure.
He's running for U.S. Senate, Dianne Feinstein's seat as a Republican.
Oh, that's right, yes.
His campaign is full-on anti-Israel. I mean, he is holding nothing back, no holds barred. The man is very courageous. He's a ex-Marine that fought in Afghanistan, and he, a one-man protest in front of AIPAC, accusing them of everything that, that they should be accused of, that nobody has the guts to their face. And the man is just, and he was leading the polls the day before yesterday, and I don't know what's happened to him. Now, he is totally, I mean, if you haven't heard of him, and I don't see him on the normal sites that you would see somebody like him, they have just totally darkened this guy. They've totally tried to make him totally invisible, and that in and of itself is very telling.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the numbers right now, and the media is saying he only got 1.2% of the vote, but Little apparently says that he thinks there was widespread voter fraud, and he's going to file a lawsuit. So that's where we are on that.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Now, I did hear that last night also. Yeah, if you want to, it's littlerevolution.us is his campaign site.
Okay.
littlerevolution.us.
All right. Well, thank you for the information. And we're going to let you go because we're coming up on another commercial break here. Fox News is now reporting that the odds of Democrats seizing the House just got worse, apparently despite an exuberance of, oh, yes, we had the blue wave. Apparently, it isn't really happening. The odds are shifting back toward the Republicans. So that'll be a good thing. We're going to take another break here for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, coming up on the top of the hour. And story just came on in, and I really shouldn't gloat. I should strive to retain a certain degree of dignity. But apparently CNN's ratings collapse is continuing into June. Gloat, 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 gloat. Nobody likes a liar, is what it comes on down to. Okay, now then, do you remember the Forest High School shooting? New development on that one. The shooter was actually on video, and police officers were speaking with him, and he openly admits he had been in a mental hospital and was prescribed medication, then released. It's not the guns. It's the drugs. And we are saturating our society with these psychological medications. And we know they cause problems. And not just for Roseanne Barr. But we have to wonder if some of the bizarre thinking that we are seeing coming out of corporate media and our government and our corporate leadership is because we've drugged our entire society to the edge of a psychotic break. Somebody's got to look at this. We're frying our brains chemically for the sake of a fast buck. And once again, we have a clear link between psychiatric medication and a mass shooting, but of course the gun grabbers are going to say, oh, it's the guns, we got to get the guns. No, getting the guns won't solve that. Look what's happening over in Great Britain, where knife crimes are on the rise. So, speaking of Roseanne Barr, again, this political correctness thing where for some reason, somebody got it into their head that an image of an ape is linked to the black population. And I don't know where that came from. I mean, technically, we're all apes, and apes come in all colors. Look at chimpanzees, for example. But all of a sudden, the people playing the race card for the elections, they've got another cause. We've got to get rid of gorillas here. And apparently, over in Texas, social justice lunatics literally forced the removal of a gorilla statue from a Texas public park because the statue was deemed racially insensitive. I'm sorry, gorilla is not a race. And they said it was a metaphor for the institution of slavery. And the local population just started laughing at the city officials until finally the officials put the statue back, but they painted it gray so it would no longer be black. What a nation of whining crybabies we have turned into under the liberals. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification. 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And hour number 3, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We have a caller waiting on the line, but before I get to it, I was taking a look starting from Patrick Little as a jumping off point and taking a look at some of the people who were running for office here. And apparently there was this Nathan Larson who's actually running to become a congressman. He's a self-described white supremacist and pedophile. And apparently he spent 16 months in prison after being convicted in 2009 over an apparent plot to kill either George W. Bush or Barack Obama. And because of a law passed in 2016 in Virginia, he can still run for office. He's contesting as an independent, having been expelled from the Libertarian Party. Is this really the best that we can do? Is this really the best that we can do? It's just... Our government's becoming a joke. When I grew up, schools were always teaching that people who were in Congress represented the best and brightest. These days, they very often seem to be the worst and stupidest. Some of the things coming out of, Nancy Pelosi's mouth or Maxine Waters' mouth. Anyway, let's take a phone call. Dave in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, howdy, Mike. Hope you're having a blessed day, brother.
I am. Thank you very much.
So how did you sleep last night after your marathon? I imagine you probably rolled up on the couch pretty early, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I did. Of course, I have to look after Claire and everything. But once she went to bed and I had her tucked in, yeah, I definitely slept after the marathon. I'm getting to be an older guy, and I have to sort of slow down.
Come on now. Is she doing okay? Is she doing any better?
She's doing better. It's going to take a very long time. Now we know exactly what we've been dealing with all this time. The real complication, the real problem is that it took 3 months to get her into Straub to get a real doctor to look at her. now that she's in the system, she's getting physical therapy and various other things. She gets a bone density scan in August. But for those first 3 months, we had 3 different chiropractors, 2 of whom were flakes, and the third one was simply not in a position to be able to know what had gone wrong. So Claire has... Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe she should consider renouncing her American citizenship, claiming Somalia, or some other Kenyan or whatever, third world, and then come back over here and say, hey, you owe me free medical care. I bet you would have got in the next day. Anyway, I'm sorry about that.
It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. But...
yeah, she wouldn't have had to wait so long. So the reason I called, a couple of things. To me, this is USS Liberty Week every single year. Yesterday was my birthday, born June 5th, 1967. I was 51. You know what happened that day?
Yes.
But if you try to study that, the prelude to it, because the propaganda is, Israel was surrounded by the Muslim armies who were going to drive them into the sea. That's the only thing you can find. Whereas then Israel preemptively attacked everybody yesterday morning, 51 years ago now. Hate to give up my age. Destroyed air forces on the ground, killed troops at breakfast, and increased their land mass by 3-fold. It's been going on forever. Then tomorrow will be the anniversary of the attack on the Liberty, which I know you won't forget. But still no justice. So the reason I called today was about the utter insanity. And, I kind of went down the rabbit hole and got into Albert Pike a little. So this is what I want to ask you. I want to ask you 2 questions. Number one, can you kind of clear up the history of the prelude leading up to what happened yesterday, 51 years ago? That the Israelis actually were the aggressor instead of preemptively, defending themselves against the Muslims going to drive into the sea. But I kind of want history on that. I've never been able to find, and also Albert Pike, who it's so weird to me, And so my point is, these people knew what was going to go down throughout the 20th century and the late 19th century. I mean, nailed it. Pike did, several of us, before there was ever really an Israel. So is this the Kabbalah? Is this the Masons? Is this what is the guiding force that knew what was going to happen, drove it? We know it's probably organized or financed by the Rothschilds. What is the actual guiding hand? It's so hidden, and it's hidden in plain sight. I got to tell you, I just drove through Nashville. Nashville has an AT&T building that is probably the most demonic-looking building you will ever see. It has to be a Masonic structure, and so and you see that almost in every city where there is something that is it sets your soul on edge because it's not right. It shouldn't be so overt. But there it is in your face, like, what do they call, one world trade, freedom, whatever that is. It's so overt, so in your face, this Luciferian hidden hand. And so, they know what's going on. And so, Mike, it feels like, and I don't want to give up any more than you do. I've taken so many beatings. You've probably taken more. I fought in the Clintons in Arkansas until I was blacklisted and run out of the state. I was one of the few people that didn't get killed. Probably because I was more public than everybody else. So we're losing, man. They're winning. They win on every count. Who are they? And please, if you can, if you know some of the hidden history about the prelude leading up to the events of the 6-Day War, I just don't believe the history that I see, because everything you find says the Muslims were surrounding them, staged on all sides, going to drive them to the sea. If the Jews hadn't acted, there wouldn't be any Israel. Who's going to cry about that? But that's the history you hear, and you hear nothing else. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here with that. Amy said, by the way, my wife said, why don't they paint that gorilla pink since we're all effeminate now anyway? Let's just go on out.
That's a good idea.
And we love you, and Claire, God bless you. We love you. God bless you. Please, folks, support RBN. We have to have them. I'm going to let you go, Mike, and listen to your response.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. The 6-Day War was basically Israel was never going to accept a 2-state solution. or the United Nations partition plan, and the Six-Day War was simply Israel grabbing what was left of Palestine and turning it into occupied territory. And then they went on out by saying, oh, we had no choice. Those evil Muslims were coming to get us. Again, it's just more lies and cover-up of imperialism. And as far as a master plan, if you will, it's there in the Torah. Eretz Israel, what they all want, what they're all taught to want from childhood, is the Israel that's described in the Torah, which reaches from the Nile to the Euphrates. And just like the American Christian Zionists, the Israelis, especially in the government, they're captured and enslaved and driven by their religious beliefs. So we've got all these people running around the planet with nuclear weapons screaming, God wills it, God wills it, God wills it. By the way, that was a really good idea. You know, let's take all the gorilla statues and paint them with different patterns and everything. We have geckos here in Honolulu, where artists are given these blank geckos and they paint them with music notes or something like that. We could do that with the gorillas, and that will absolutely get rid of this whole idea that they are somehow racist. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go back to the phones to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I'm not sure exactly what might be wrong with Patrick Little. He did serve honorably in the armed forces in a combat area, and he's pledged to help rid the U.S. government of Zionist influence, and he's showing what the Young Turks call disturbing poll numbers. And while the places like the SPLC have an APAC, whatever, have cause to overestimate anti-Semitic violence and hate crimes, they do not have a cause to overestimate the influence of the far right in the United States. However, last year, an ABC poll showed that 10% of Americans would support a Nazi government. I wonder what that's like now that Trump is basically, wanting to get us into a bunch of new wars for Israel. That's about all I have to say today.
That strikes me as kind of a really bizarre poll to be running there. I just got an email here from somebody whose neighbors support Israel, and they used to fly the flag of Israel, but apparently ever since the Bloody Monday massacre, those flags aren't there anymore. So, yeah, Israel stepped across a line.
I want to note that every anti-Patrick Little video, the comments are all pro-Patrick Little, and a lot of them are hoping that he runs for president in 2020, and I myself would vote for him. I don't see anything wrong with this platform, really. A lot of people complain about far right's views on free speech, but in Germany, the communists have actually almost taken over, and there was also the Weimar Republic, which was life under the Jewish financiers. So
yes,
we're heading right into that in the United States today. So hopefully we can avoid it by peaceful means before we have to resort to other means. But that's about all I got for you today. Thank you for your good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Pardon me. Apparently, the Government Accountability Office has recommended that Congress withhold funding for the F-35 program, saying the jet fighter is plagued with almost 1,000 deficiencies that must be resolved before production can begin. And the problems with the F-35, we've talked about them for years now. An ejector seat that can break the neck of the pilot, a totally unusable helmet-mounted display system. Apparently, like the F-22, the F-35 has problems with its oxygen supply. And apparently, their mid-air refueling probe can snap off during use. Now, the Pentagon wanted to go ahead and just start construction on the planes and then go back with retrofits. oh, this is a problem, we'll make up a whole new bunch of aerial refueling probes and go out in the field and install them. And the GAO is saying, no, not with this many problems. And the GAO is being smart here, because the F-35 is supposed to go into full rate production next year at a cost of $10.4 billion per year for the next 20 years. And the GAO is saying, no, not going to move forward until they actually know the problems are solved. And again, this gets back to the fact that here in the United States, military procurement is all about the money, not about the quality of the weapons. It's a military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. And we're seeing it in all this money that we poured into the military. And now we're finding out that most new Navy officers can't handle their ships, and that's why there have been all these collisions. The Gerald R. Ford magnetic catapult system, it's actually breaking the airplanes. Propulsion problems. The list goes on and on. It really does. All right, let's take another phone call. Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Just a couple of things quickly. Yeah, Patrick literally pretty much got creamed, but, you know, what can you expect? It's pretty tough to go into California as an anti-Zionist. As far as the wars that Trump's ballyhooing, I just don't think our Navy is going to attack any of Israel's enemies. This would have happened a long time ago. They got creamed in 2006. It's been how many years since they got their butt kicked in Lebanon?
Yes.
Been working on trying to get something going with Trump, but I just don't think the Navy pilots are excited about flying into airspace with sophisticated aircraft for Israel. And, you know, these people aren't stupid. They know all about Pollard and how Israel treated the Navy, you know, the Liberty.
Yep.
I just don't think we're going to be able to convince our troops to fall on the sword. And I think our wars are in a stalemate now. So that's just my opinion right now. What do you think, Mike?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, right now, Afghanistan is a draw. The U.S. is mired there. The U.S. is clearly losing in Syria. And it does look like the wheels are coming off the war wagon. Because when you have a grand design for reconquering Earth that requires multiple wars, you have to win them all. The first one you lose, the game is over. Public support for any more wars evaporates after you've lost one. We saw that following Vietnam. When it was obvious we couldn't win in Vietnam, and they reached a settlement with North Vietnam and brought the troops home, it was a very long time before the U.S. was able to get public support to go into another country.
Yeah. I think basically we've survived a long time with a poker hand that nobody can see. And what it is we just ain't got the heart to do a big war. You know, it's too much. The casualties would be too fast and furious, you know, against any of these new opponents that we're talking about here.
Yep.
And once they find out that we just don't have the supply lines, and you look at, they'll find out that we're a paper tigers if we get into a scrap with an organized Air Force, you know, far away from home.
Yep.
So, all right, Mike, thanks for taking my call.
All right, you've got it. I mean, certainly the 2 cruise missile attacks by Trump into Syria following these false flag chemical attacks demonstrated that our cruise missiles aren't very good. A lot of them missed their targets. It's a very, very poor success rate. And I think that's why so many other countries like Turkey are saying, to heck with American weapons, we're going to go buy Russian. And the U.S. is out there saying, don't you dare buy Russian. You buy our weapons, bad things will happen to you. But that caller is absolutely right. The problem with a bully is they can bully one person at a time. But if everybody in that schoolyard at the same time decides to stand up to the bully, it's a different story. And we could see that happen. We're seeing more and more countries pivot toward Russia and China. We could get into a situation where the United States and maybe a few of the European countries are still aligned against the entire rest of the world. So I think the rest of the world is getting sick and tired of the U.S. pushing their weight around. We've had 18 years of war. 18 years. We're all tired. We're all tired because nothing seems to get accomplished. There's no victory. There's only the profits. We go from war to war to war to war, which was the agenda for the Project for the New American Century. Literally a century of endless war. And I don't think people are comfortable with nonstop war. We invade this country, then we invade this country, then we invade this country. Anyway, in the world of science, apparently on Mars, Curiosity has discovered something. They were able to engineer a way to finally get that little drill on that little robotic arm to work again. And they started drilling, and apparently they found something of tremendous interest, which they're going to announce tomorrow on NASA TV, basically an hour before the start of my program. And no, wait a minute, it's 2 p.m. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's when it starts on NASA TV. And everybody's out there saying, what did they find? What did they find? What did they find? There was a little poll that was up there. And the overwhelming response is they're going to find evidence that there was or is life on Mars. Now, of course, for myself, we already know the answer to that, because the Viking landers found indigenous life on Mars all the way back in 1976. And the information primarily came from an experiment called the Labeled Release Experiment by Dr. Gilbert Levin. We've had him on the show before, and I imagine he's waiting for this press conference tomorrow as well. All right, we're going to be right back after these few words. Stay tuned. And aloha, welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the fact that NASA is teasing an announcement tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. They're going to have a press conference. It's going to be carried live on NASA TV, and it's a big mystery. They've kept this one under wraps, and they had a poll. You know, what do you think NASA is going to unveil? And the number one response in the poll was evidence that Mars had indigenous or has indigenous life. They didn't have a category for the cat, the dead cat. Because, you know, Curiosity killed the cat. Never mind. But again, although I think if they have found proof of life, I'm sure NASA and Curiosity are going to wallow in the glory, and they should to an extent, but they shouldn't forget that we've been here before. Because back in 1976, there were 2 landers on Mars called the Viking landers. And on board each one was a device called the Labeled Release Experiment, developed by a guy named Dr. Gilbert Levin. And as I mentioned, we've had him here on the show. And it was a very, very simple device. It wasn't science fiction technology. It was actually an adaptation of an existing device that is used to test civic water systems for bacterial contamination. And the way it works is that you take a sample of the water from the civic water system, or in the case of Mars, a sample of dirt, and you drop it into this nutrient solution tagged with a radioactive isotope, and you let it sit. And at the top of this little test system, there's a radiation detector that is waiting to basically detect the radioactive isotope released by metabolic processes. And the Labeled Release Experiment showed a positive result. Huzzah, huzzah. There was a second experiment called the Organic Mass Spectrometer, the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, the GCMS. And it was there to try and detect a pre-selected group of organic molecules that would be assumed to be part of any indigenous life on Mars. This one returned a negative result. And NASA, for whatever reasons, decided to go with the negative result and declared Mars life-free. Other people had different opinions. Other scientists around the world looked at the LRE data and said, no, this worked. This found indigenous life. Now, the reason this is a problem for whatever Curiosity may have found is because Viking was sterilized to go to Mars. It was autoclaved right there on the launch pad. inside its little aero shell. And because NASA said no life was found, subsequent missions to Mars, the landers and rovers, weren't sterilized, which means earthly microbes may have hitched a ride. That's going to complicate identification if, in fact, Curiosity has found something. But again, a lot of people are very, shall we say, chauvinistic about life. When they talk about life out there in the universe, they always want it to be life as we know it under environmental conditions like we have here. And that's unrealistic, and it's narrowing your focus. I mean, the extremophiles on our own planet show that life flourishes in incredibly diverse environments. Boiling water, ice cold water, extreme altitude. And they're all probably very comfortable where they are because that's where they evolved to be. So hopefully after all these years, Dr. Levin will be vindicated. Now, if I were in charge of NASA and set aside all that joke about having the flight crews dress up in ape suits, because now I'll be called racist, I'd want to send something to a more extreme environment, like Titan. See if there's anything crawling around those methane moons. Now, I do know that you probably heard they wanted to send a probe to Europa, one of the moons around Jupiter, and they were going to drill through the ice, a huge thickness of ice. They've been experimenting with this down in Antarctica. Send in a robotic submarine to look for life and other things. They just realized that there are, in fact, geysers on Europa. So they're going to be able to sample that water without having to drill. That's going to be a much, much simpler mission to do. So if you hadn't guessed by now, big fan of the space program. I love what SpaceX is doing. I love what Virgin Galactic is doing. I'm glad that NASA is starting to get back into R&D instead of just rubber stamping human-caused global warming. Because we need technology incubators. That is the only way we're going to get a manufacturing economy back, is to have new technologies, new industries, new products that the rest of the world has to come to us to buy. That would also fix the trade imbalance. We need to do it. We need the political will to do that. So anyway, tomorrow will be exciting for those of us who are space-type people, and we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. A little update on the Kilauea volcano. I mentioned earlier in the show that the lava has filled all of Kaonohi Bay. Volcanologists are saying this has been the single most destructive day of any eruption in modern times. And people are starting to equate the current eruption to one they had back, I think it was 1924. That was a really bad one. The lava that has covered Kaonohi Bay is extending 0.8 of a mile from the coastline. Now the question is it a nice pile of lava or is it a lava bench? And what I mean by a lava bench is when you have the hot lava going into the ocean, it will cool and solidify. And very often it will create this large platform of lava with nothing underneath to hold it up. And it happens all the time. It's a regular situation. And when those fall into, when they do collapse, when they fall into the ocean, that's when we will get some small tsunamis. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But yeah, this is a bad one. And again, if you're anywhere near Hawaii, do not go down to the volcano. First of all, the air is not healthy. The ash is finely ground glass particles. You don't want to get that in your eye. And yes, the police have been arresting people who are past the cordoned off area, trying to get pictures or samples of the lava. It's an active volcano, people. Got to treat it with respect. I mean, Claire and I live here on Oahu. We're not going down there. You know, we're perfectly happy watching it on TV. we've been down there. It's kind of weird watching the eruption, and basically places that we have been, places we stood, just aren't there anymore. I was looking at the photos of the collapse of Kilauea crater and wondering if Volcano House is going to survive. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, long before the volcano was a national park, there was a hotel perched on the rim of Kilauea, and it was called, obviously, Volcano House. And it goes back a long, long way. In fact, Mark Twain stayed there when he was doing his time here in the Hawaiian Islands. And it's been preserved and renovated throughout the years. And Claire and I, when we visited the Big Island and toured the volcanoes, discovered this beautiful piano made out of koa wood, which is our native Hawaiian hardwood. And I have a lovely photo of Claire playing that piano. And I just hope it's still there. I just hope it's still there. But this is Mother Nature, both here and at Fuego. And all we can do is sit and wait to see what happens. Okay, over on YouTube, they have now declared that videos showing natural medicine are just as dangerous to society as how to make a bomb video. That's how abusive the censorship is getting. Obviously, YouTube is out there. They want to preserve the profits of pharmaceutical corporations who advertise with them. And so now out there, they're saying that videos that talk about natural medicine are dangerous to society, as dangerous as bomb-making videos. It really is very, very silly, but they're enforcing that policy. They're starting to tear down videos on how to treat minor ailments yourself with over-the-counter medications or herbal supplements. Because by golly, you will go to the doctor, and you will spend money on the doctor, and you will get a prescription from the doctor, and you'll go to the pharmacy, and you'll spend more money. And that is fascism. That's what's making America great again here. The other day we were talking about this story where California has passed some extraordinarily restrictive limits on water consumption. 55 gallons per person per day. And it was worked out that basically that's enough water to do a load of laundry or to have a shower, but not both in one day's time. And there are hefty fines for violating these water limits. This has prompted a huge backlash from Californians who are pointing out that Nestle continues to pump billions of gallons of water out of the aquifers for pretty much next to nothing. And that California is obviously putting the interests of for-profit corporations over the interests of their people. And it wouldn't be the first time, because when Claire and I first moved here to Hawaii all those years ago, all we used to hear about all the time is water shortage, water shortage, water shortage, water shortage. And in the middle of the island in the Central Valley were all these sugar plantations and pineapple plantations and all of that stuff. But over time, a lot of that land has been turned over for residential development. And as the plantations needed less and less water, we started hearing less and less about there's a water shortage. So there you go. Now you know where you rank on the grand scheme of things. Here's a story that's coming out of Daily Native News, and it supports something I have been concerned about for a long time. Apparently in Ontario, Canada, there was a crop of GMO corn planted, and one of the local beekeepers, Dave Shute, who produces honey in Elmwood, said that 37 million bees just died after that GMO corn was planted. He said once the corn started to get planted, our bees died by the millions. Now, whatever they're going to call the company from now on, because it's not Monsanto, obviously does not want that to be out there in public. They want to go on selling GMO and glyphosate. But the reason I think there is merit in this, that it wasn't mites or nicotinoids, is because several years ago, I came across an article in the journal Nature which is a highly respected article. And it was talking about early results of studies that showed GMO pollen was harmful to benign insect species, and that they had basically determined that the sudden decline in the monarch butterfly was due to the larvae eating GMO pollen. And the monarch butterfly population did go into serious decline. It's starting to come back. But I remember when I was a kid just seeing clouds and clouds of monarch butterflies, and now maybe there'll be one that flies through the backyard. Again, this genetic technology is the most dangerous technology humans have ever played with. And it's just being handled recklessly. And we live in a culture where products that are known to be harmful and bad are still allowed to be sold because it makes money. And the companies that are making money off of these bad products are tithing members of Congress, who will then look the other way. Do you know Congress actually did hold hearings on this link between prescription psychiatric medication and violent behavior, especially SSRIs? They actually held hearings, and in the end, they did nothing. Because lobbyists from the big pharmaceutical corporations were out there lobbying and saying, oh, no, you can't do this. Or we're going to support you in your next campaign, but you can't go there. That's how government is bought by the corporations. And here is the situation with like vaccines and autism. They're stuck. They can't ever admit that vaccines cause autism, because then there will be a huge raft of lawsuits for going back generations for the cost of taking care of these autistic people. And the same thing with GMO. Now that it's permeated our entire biosphere, they don't dare admit that it causes these problems. They'll be sued out of existence. Same thing with glyphosate. That's why they're fighting so hard against the determination that it is a probable human carcinogen. They want to avoid the lawsuits. They don't care about your health. They just want your money. There was another article that we ran on the website today about how grocers are spraying glyphosate on the produce, in the produce section of the market. Well, the reason they're doing that is glyphosate acts as a preservative. And so it's sprayed on the produce when it's harvested, put on the truck. When it gets to the supermarket, they spray it again. Makes it look fresher, makes it last longer. But it's a potentially toxic, dangerous chemical. And when you have corporate interest and government authority aligned together against the general population, you have fascism. And that's pretty much where we are. Okay, let's see. This article here, 330 million guns killed no one yesterday. If we had a gun problem, we would know about it. It's not a gun problem. It's a medication problem here. Now, the big story, this was just on Fox a little while ago. It turns out the Obama administration granted a license allowing Iran access to the United States financial system, despite officials' pledges that they would prohibit it. This is according to a draft report from the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Obama was bending the rules. And meanwhile, the corporate media is still focused and obsessed on Donald Trump here. I already talked about the volcano here. This story really bothers me. And as you know, I have a very negative feeling toward anybody who abuses a child, either physically or sexually. And apparently somebody is trying to do something about this, because they got this investigation out there trying to round some of these pedophiles up. And apparently this last batch they got included a Legoland employee, a Disney employee, and a scout leader. Are we really that sick as a species? Or are these people on these prescription psychiatric medications? Because I don't remember this being that big a problem when I was a kid. Of course, we didn't have the internet. And back then, of course, the corporate media was afraid to say anything about the pedophilia going on in the church. Didn't want to go to the dark regions. Can't rat out Father O'Flaccid. You're going to go right down to the dark places when you die. That is a little bit sick. Okay, looks like Britain got their the first of their 120 million pound stealth fighters is being delivered. Meanwhile, apparently China has come out with a hypersonic stealth drone that can fly like a fighter plane, and apparently is going to be able to take on the F-35 and the F-22. All right, we have a phone call. Jim in Ohio. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, I don't know if you remember or not, but a few years ago there was a beekeeper in Illinois who proved that his bee colonies were dying whenever they sprayed the glyphosate on the corn, and they came and confiscated his bees.
Who came?
Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I remember the story vaguely. Yeah. Who confiscated his bees?
I believe it was the Department of Agriculture of the state of Illinois.
Well, I guess they didn't want the evidence.
Yeah, I guess not. I guess they, in other words, the public be damned, everything for the corporations.
Yeah, I mean, it's become the curse of our country. And that's why I'm saying we're not a capitalist society anymore. We've gone full fascist. You look back at the Securities Exchange Commission, was supposed to be keeping an eye on Bernie Madoff. They handed him resumes. They wanted in on the party. Minerals Management Service, ignoring the Deepwater Horizon's maintenance problems. It just seems like the entire machinery of the government that is supposed to take care of the American people has shut down.
Well, in other words, the government is losing all credibility with the general population, and I've studied other countries like Argentina, and their government is completely out of control, and they in other words, anybody that has a business down there has to pay bribes to stay in business because they constantly change regulations. But I guess down there, everybody pretty much ignores the government because they know they're just a bunch of crooks, a bunch of thieving crooks.
Well, we have that same thing up here, and maybe governments have always behaved like this. Maybe there's always been this degree of corruption, and maybe we're only learning about it now because of the age of the internet and the independent media. And hopefully that's going to lead to a transformative event where governments are going to have to be more responsive to the people that they serve. I don't know. I mean, when I started getting into this whole conspiracy thing, looking on back and realizing that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated by a conspiracy, and it was hidden from us. So maybe this kind of skullduggery has been going on all along. Maybe everybody in politics is equally dirty and corrupt, but now we're all seeing it.
Well, Congress gets their, Martha Stewart went to prison for insider trading her stock of her company, but Congress can do that with impunity. They get insider tips all the time. That's why they all are millionaires by the time they leave Congress, because of all their insider information.
Yeah, there was actually a bill introduced. I mean, it's already illegal for Congress to do that. But they introduced a bill to explicitly say Congress may not trade on information. It was immediately voted down, of course. You're right. It's absolutely a racket. They're in Congress there for themselves. When they voted through the troubled asset relief policy after 2008, they weren't doing it to protect the American people. They were protecting their own stock portfolios because they were invested in the very companies TARP was being used to prop up.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. We no longer have a representative government. We have a government that's for the government by the government.
Oligarchs. We have oligarchs, and we have not had a representative government going back as far as the election fraud has been in place, and that's the first thing that we have to fix after the coming collapse and the rebuild is we have to have an absolutely trustworthy, verifiable election system. Because otherwise, the sociopaths will just steal the nation away from us again. Anyway, Jim, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And somebody just emailed me a quote from Marcus Tullius Cicero. Politicians are not born, they are excreted. The wisdom of the ancients right there. All right, we're going to take one more phone call here. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I think Marcus was onto something there.
I agree. That goes in the master quotes file.
Hey, when Gaius Julius Caesar would walk into Britannia, like a new unconquered province, he would show up with 10 to 30,000 soldiers and would end up conquering a place that had 300,000. What he would do is he'd go in there and find out the politics, who hates who, and would actually encourage infighting, and then come in later and mop it all up, which is exactly what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get through 4 topics in 4 minutes here, if that's possible. Okay, so that doesn't even count. So, robot insect control that you discussed a couple days ago, where you got little robots either killing the weeds by delivering poison or else by actually hunting certain insects. Okay, so from my perspective, what this is extremely dangerous. It's trying to normalize autonomous hunter-killer robots legalized on domestic soil and to normalize infrastructure, build the towers, the programs, everything normal. Then the next step is, you know what, we're going to solve the rat problem and mice get into silos. It would make them a little bit bigger, then go hunt the mice. And then, you know what, we're going to solve foxes that get in the hen house.
Mateus, you're behind the times. There are police departments all over the United States that already have aerial drones that carry lethal force.
Okay, I'm behind the times. Okay, next topic is I make a prediction that Hillary Clinton, when she dies, she's going to just bring everybody down with her. The only thing that might stop that is her daughter. She'd happily let Bill fry. So that's the only thing. Does the Hill Dog have enough paternal instincts to resist revenge on everybody?
Hillary's never going to die. Hillary's never going to die. Heaven doesn't want her, and hell's afraid she'll take over.
Okay, I'm wrong again. Okay, third time lucky. Ready for my most crazy theory ever?
Yes.
Okay, so when the dinosaurs were extincted, little fuzzy mammals evolved into us, and then we went to the moon and walked on the moon. So there's precedent set that little fuzzy mice can go be aliens and explore other planets. So that's ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous thing that anyone's ever heard of, but it happened. So why is it any more ridiculous to say that some reptiles could have gotten smart and exited the planet? And on top of that, it's even more likely that it would have happened to reptiles because the reptiles were around for hundreds of millions of years more than the mammals. So they had statistically
you're
more
absolutely
probability.
Right. If it hadn't been for the Chicxulub asteroid, the dinosaurs, who, by the way, are birds, not reptiles, they would have remained the dominant life form, and we would have had them flying the space shuttles. And
I'm saying that they succeeded. They blew themselves up, most of them. Some of them left, and now these are the aliens that are monitoring us. That's the theory.
That's a little out there. That's a little out there. Mateus, I got to let you go.
I told you.
There's the music, and we got to let you go because it's the end of our show. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, except for the part about fuzzy aliens, and share it with everybody that you know. Email, person-to-person contact. Don't waste your time on social media. It is being heavily censored and filtered right now. We need to work to educate our fellow Americans as to what is really going on in the world before we all start having mushroom clouds out our front windows. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.